ultra distance cycling shouldn't be seen as this extreme thing where these people are like ending up sort of stumbling over the line because they've used their last bit of energy. The whole thing should be enjoyable, and putting yourself in the best situation on the start line will help you to get the most enjoyment out of it.
Welcome to Cycling Demystified, brought to you by Foundation Bike Fit and Frequency Cycle Works, the podcast where we help you take your cycling to the next level by sharing the knowledge from experienced bike fitters, mechanics, and the hidden players within the bike industry.
This week we conclude our discussion about ultra distance preparation with Coach Sam from Acier and Lee from Peak Bike Fitting. We start by covering specific bike fit considerations and when you can change your bike fit, how fuel can be an emotional tool you can employ, and of course, what our favourite ride snacks are. So listen on for part 2 of how to prepare for ultra distance.
Wait, I was going to ask you a question. Sorry, I was just wondering if because we're talking about like specific stuff, and you are obviously a very well-known bike fitter in London. Do you find that like you do change your bike fit process slightly differently for ultra distance, or do you kind of always have the same process and it doesn't really differ?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, of course, going back to Sam's favourite word, specificity, you do have to have specificity. Like every bike fit is aiming to get a rider to a specific goal, and so the kind of solutions for every rider is going to be slightly different. And so if you're doing an ultra distance event, then your overall position is probably going to be quite different to a 1 hour crit racing position. The process in which we go through it is pretty similar because we have to establish some baselines and norms within your biomechanics and your movement, but then figuring out where you want to sit within what we call your fit window is going to be a decision that's made based on your discipline, your event, your duration, and for that rider to decide for themselves as well where do they want to be within their kind of fit range or fit window.
With that sort of specificity on ultra distance, I think one of the key things that we see with bike setups, even on hilly events, is people running clip-on aero bars, and obviously that means it's very different to just fitting someone on a time trial bike where their position is in the aero bars for the whole thing. So what's sort of your process of going about fitting someone to basically essentially have got two positions on the same bike? So what sort of trade-offs are there in either one that you've got to take into account?
Yeah, I think aero bars are actually a really great tool for ultra distance. It was essentially unlike the name suggests, they're not for aerodynamic gains primarily, but for positional gains, in that you can put your body into a different position, use and recruit different muscles to hold a position, and therefore you can spread the load across your body in a different kind of way, so you don't end up overloading a single part of your body if you just have one position. So it's giving your body choice. And additionally, just as a aside, then most ultra distance riders will find aero bars really useful for attaching other bags and tools and food to, which is a nice bonus.
Yeah, well, there's one thing I disagree with you there, that it is about performance, because comfort is performance. If you can't sit in your saddle comfortably and you're always in and out, but there is an aerodynamic bit. If you're going to headwind on the flat, you want to be in the aero bars as much as possible. But if your bum's hurting you so much, you have to keep getting in and out and sitting on the hoods and changing your position. Then over time, I mean, that's one bit of aerodynamics. I mean, 1% gain over 1,000 kilometers is a big gain in the end. So I think that's where maybe that's sort of the high end. But well, it works both ways. The people out there for longer, 1% works out of the bigger period of time over the whole thing. But then sort of the high end performance bit, you can add all these little, I'm trying to think of another way to say marginal gains, but not not quite creative enough today, but yeah, it's yeah. I think essentially my point is that yeah, I think that's one of the big things why I encourage all the people I work with to really consider
Mm.
their bike
I think
their bike positioning and get a professional
Mm.
bike fit is because it's comfort, performance, and ultimately enjoyment. It's not fun, I know,
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
by a painful experience that. Go ahead,
I
Lee.
was just thinking, yeah, like, the way I was trained, especially for bike fitting specific, I think like the idea of most cycling injuries, apart from when you're falling off, are due to like repetition. You're doing something over and over again, and the word cycle just means revolution. You're literally just going round and round. And if your saddle height is slightly too high, slightly too low, slightly too far back, your bars are slightly too low. There's so many different things that are so multifaceted, but like having someone contextually look at you and give advice from a professional standpoint, I think is super, super important for things like ultra distance. And I know it's hard to think because it's not something easily as quantifiable as like a crit, because you know that you'll get in a position where you are a little bit more aero and it's firing the right muscles, and we can see that what's physically going up as you're pedaling. Whereas ultra distance thing, yeah, day two you're going to be a lot more tired and fatigued than day one. That's just the way it goes. So it is about finding like the kind of, we're still working with the fundamentals like saddle height, setback and stuff, but I think it's really important to get those correct, but then also just be able to kind of do that load for a long time. And I think if you are someone out there who has done an ultra race before and maybe had a knee pain and you had to scratch just before. I've had a few friends that have had things like this and they've never had a bike fit, and I think if you are hurting in the knee for the first 100 miles, it's only going to get worse. It's never going to get better. Like, it doesn't matter how many painkillers you take. And you have to think about these things in order to kind of get the most out of the events and also enjoy them as well.
I think that looking in that context, in sort of the wider context, I think it's what we both of our professions aim to offer is helping to people to get the most out of their experience. And it's one of the common things that I mean, I encourage people to have a bike fit, but I'm never going to force them because it's an additional expense. But you take that expense into the wider scheme of things, into how much both there's the financial expense of the equipment. I mean, people usually drop 5-10 grand on a bike, and if it's a couple extra £100, euros, whatever, to make sure it fits you correctly, I mean it's a no-brainer. You wouldn't go out and buy a piece of furniture without making sure it fits in your living room. And so sort of it's taking all these things into perspective of yeah, you don't want to get there and not have a good experience because with all these parts that you're not properly prepared. So yes, I think it's that context which I think is important when looking at things like bike fit.
Mm-hmm. I've got a really bad habit that I need to kind of also, like, well, confess to you first of all, but also to kind of probably help other people that have the same kind of annoying mindset. So I'll go on a ride, maybe 100 kilometers, and I'll take with me as little water and as little food because I know my body can handle it. So I'm like, I'm training my body, and also it's just annoying to have to stop and eat a bar or something like that, or if you can't do it on the bike because you've got your gloves on if it's cold. And I know it's wrong, but I just can't get past the kind of idea of feeling like I've made it somehow because I've done it without having to eat. And then I'm like, well, if I'm in an ultra distance race, when I have these periods where I access food, I'm essentially training my body. Tell me how I'm wrong.
Um, there are specific occasions you can look to. Well, in like the example you gave there, it's probably about encouraging your body to be able to work when fasted. But I think there's times where you can apply that training in more specifically in a more controlled way. But I think the key point is that you've got to remember you're training and you want to get the best out of that training and the best performance. So most of the time that's going to involve being properly fueled, and because well, it's slightly different with your, well, maybe not slightly different with the ride of that duration that you're saying. There's the whole concept of progressive overload, being able to get the body to adapt to an increased strain on it, is around making sure that stress is adequate and appropriate. So if you're overstressing the body, then it's going to take more recovery. It's going to set you back more. I mean, this whole concept is, so you put stress in the body in appropriate amounts, and the body then responds through supercompensation after rest and recovery to be at a higher level afterwards. But that's all going to be balanced by the stress you put in, getting that recovery afterwards, and having it in appropriate amounts. So what you're doing there is likely to be overstressing. I would worry that if you're not recovering properly, then you're setting yourself back even more. And yeah, it's all got to be balanced. There's the training side, and these sort of all-out efforts are for the racing. And another concept I think is important to remember is that the training itself, you don't get fitter just by doing a training session. It only gives you the potential for improvements and for adaptations, for gains. It's only during rest and recovery that they are realized. So you've got to respect both parts of these as well. So yeah, it, I mean, there's going to be occasions in your training where you're going to come up against adverse situations, but I'm not a great fan of putting those in sort of gratuitously. Like if it's pouring down and rain, it's going to be miserable to go out. Yeah, there's going to be occasions in your event when that's going to come up. So you got to be prepared to do that. But then doing that week after week where it's going to cause you more harm than good. Yeah, there's a time where be like using the indoor trainer instead, even though it may not be exactly the same type of effort which you're after. It's preferable in those circumstances. So it's all big balance, really.
Yeah, I think some of that, Lee, is just through awareness as well. Just awareness that maybe you're not eating enough or not drinking enough, and that's part of the first step of, well, do I need to do anything about it afterwards?
And I think you've also got to remember in these events, the majority of the time, if you're planning properly, you're not letting yourself get into that situation. That the other side of things is being prepared to be able to take on a huge amount of food. Is what I see with a lot of people complain about gastric problems in these events, because in their training they're not taking on much food. They come to an event and they find they're stuffing a load of unfamiliar food in themselves. And I think a lot of it is overcomplicated. I think there may be specific reasons, the type of food they're taking on. If it's, I think there's certain bits which you've got to be recognizant of, like whether you're sensitive to acidic foods and so on, which could disturb the stomach. But essentially, you've got to be familiar with the type and quantity of foods that you're going to be taking on, and practice that in training. Think of these longer training rides as training the gut just as much as training the physiological systems. It's something which the professional world are doing a lot at the moment, with a lot of focus on taking in huge amount of carbohydrates during training for the body to be able to adapt to absorb that. I think we've got to think about that in a slightly nuanced way, in terms of maybe we don't need the same amount of sort of pure carbohydrate hits, but food has got to be thought as both as a fuel, and it can be used as an emotional tool as well. Because for me, I'm never happier than eating loads of croissants on the road, and that gives me a mental boost. And as well, it's the best ride fuel as well, so I'm getting that part out of it. But so you've got to be, I mean, you don't know exactly what food you're going to be coming up against, but if your body is used to, in Lee's case, used to riding off one special K bar for 100K rides, then the day that you go out and stick a full meal in you and start riding, your body knows something's different. I equate it as the same as you wouldn't go out and buy a new pair of shoes the day before you do a long ride. So why would you do take on a totally different diet, a different way of eating during the rides as well?
That makes sense. Yeah. What's your favourite ride snack then? Both of you.
Do you want to go first, Way?
It depends where you are. So yeah, if you're in France, you're never far from boulangerie. So
Oh,
Oh yes.
I'm a big sucker for pastries. I've probably had the most amazing peaches in my life in Spain. So I'm always on the lookout for that. I think you're right, Sam. A lot of it is emotionally attached and attached to those kind of memories that you've had. And for me, it's like riding in different countries and just those memories of like kind of finding things along the road. Like yeah, there's a time in Spain where like I just run out of everything, and the only thing left in the shop was like a bowl of peaches, but they were just the most amazing peaches I'd ever eaten.
but you had really
So
sticky
yeah,
handlebars.
I didn't
Yeah.
care. It all went in my mouth and down my mouth and everywhere, but it was good.
Oh, that's that. Well, I think that. Well, I've got sort of three answers, but it sort of depends because the impractical one is, if anyone knows me, they know that I'm a bit of a fiend for viennoiserie. So but then trying to eat a croissant on the go, you get half of it. Well, if it's a good one and it's a nice flaky one, half of it will be all over the road, leaving a trail of crumbs behind me. So that's an important point. You've got to think about what's practical as well. And so that's the second one. Flapjacks. They're great in terms of the nutritional makeup. Well, proper buttery one. Loads of carbs, loads of fat. Nice little compact square, so you can fit loads in. You can sort of do your Lego in your. Is Lego the right one? Sort of in your bag, so you can fit loads in. But when I'm stopped, a big bowl of gâteau de riz, which you get here in France with the caramel on the bottom, and always carry my spork with me. So a big 500-gram one of those and dig straight into it. So
Wow,
yeah, I think they're my favourites.
very specific. I like it.
There's so many like on the opposite end of the scale. I remember like climbing through the Italian Dolomites and getting to the top of a climb when it's just the weather was really coming in and it's horrible, and so you can't ride on, but you're at the top of a pass, and there happened to be a cafe or shepherd's hut kind of place, and they just served up the most amazing bean stew with like crusty bread, and that just became a thing of riding in the Dolomites. Of like, okay, we got to go and search out this this bean stew every time we go.
It's that context, isn't it?
We did the Badger Divide this year, me and my wife Sophie, and we stopped at Coral Station. Don't know if you've been there, but it's in the middle of nowhere, and they have this random like I guess restaurant. It's got like beer on tap, and because of the where it is, it does venison casserole, and it was just unbelievable. It was the tastiest thing ever, and it was just like from being in the cold and the rain all day, and all of a sudden you're in this like place with really friendly staff giving you pints of beer, and eating casserole in a really nice hot bowl. It was just the best. Just the best.
Yeah, so I told you about these unexpected experiences, and all these culinary experiences are all part of it.
Yeah, and I think that's
Yeah.
the amazing thing about the experience of doing these ultra distance events and the unknowns and the experiences that you go through. And I think maybe that's where a coach can be the most important thing that you can invest in when you're preparing for these kinds of events, or as you both were saying, someone who's had experience of what to expect along the way, or what you may encounter along the way. And a lot of that is the unknown, but also just understanding yourself as a person as you go through the unknown and navigate that. What are your decision processes going to be? How are you going to overcome whatever is going to be in front of you? What's really important for you to get out of the race? Is it enjoyment, or is it actually a number at the end of the day? And all those will inform the choices that you make, whether that's to bring a jacket, or to search out a bin bag, or to have an emergency pouch of food, or to scrape together what you can from what you can find along the road. and
I find
that informs your tolerance.
I find that a lot of the bike fits. So when it's ultra distance specific client, I find that like a large chunk of the time, and I do find they do actually last a bit longer than general bike fits. Maybe that's just me, but and I find that you spend almost like a quarter or a third of the time really discussing what type of event they're doing. And I think if you've done the event, you find that the client is. So I see the client, the cyclist. It sounds very official, doesn't it? But they want to know information. They want to know, oh, it's almost like they kind of want to know some secrets. It's like, well, where did you sleep? And where was that? And what was the weather like? And what did you take with you? And what didn't you take with you? And again, it's kind of barking on that kind of like community thing, where like, you're getting fitted by a professional, but you're also kind of like, you're getting information about the race that you wouldn't usually get as well. Because I think there's maybe it's just at the pointy end, but people like to share stories, but some people don't. It's one of those things where, like, I'm not sure how Sam feels about this, but before the more information, the better, because I like to kind of obsess over things. So planning for Dell's Divide this year was really fun, and I knew where I was stopping, all this kind of stuff. But if there was someone I knew that had done the race, I'd have been like clinging on to them, like cling film. I'd have been like, what are the secrets? What should I expect? What was the ending like? Because sometimes, things happen, like the race manual will say, oh, it's easy going, from maybe like a third to the end, so you don't have to worry about it. And then you get to that part, and then you almost feel like asking for your money back, because it's not like that at all. Like, you've actually had a really bad experience, and it's hilly, a lot hillier than they said. The weather's bad, and you're like, what? But they said it was going to be easy. And it's just like those kind of things you just want to know before, because it is so much harder dealing with it at the end of a race, as opposed to like before, because you're like, I prefer to be told it's going to be terrible when someone's just trying to protect me, or one of those things.
There's a couple of things come to mind. But I think, well, in general, yeah, having as much information as possible beforehand can help you to inform decisions about how you're going to approach the event. I think definitely in terms of things like kit choices and so on, I think that's really important. And understanding other people's experience from previous years is a good way of making that first step, but then also really respecting your own individuality, and both from kit and what you said about this part's supposed to be easy. Like, for some people may enjoy loads of short, sharp climbs. Some people may find it horrible for flat. So it's personal preferences, respecting your own individuality. And then there's some parts where people approach this from, they like it to be an adventure as much as well, and perhaps they deal with it better psychologically, not knowing exactly what's coming up. But I think you still need to be prepared in a general sense. It's, for example, like maybe an event where you've got a load of alpine passes. You sort of, I sort of won't look at them on Cycling Cole's website in advance to sort of know that it's 10% at 6.7% and the first half is 8%, the second half 6%, or whatever. I like to know sort of, yeah, it's going to be this long, this altitude, and so on. But sort of looking into those specific details, I find potential it could take away that sense of adventure. And it's sort of, do you need to know that to be able to do well? And is it going to play in your mind knowing that this bit's coming up? I don't want to contradict myself in terms of saying being properly planned and prepared, but it's how you deal with that information, knowing which information is important and how you as an individual are going to cope with that, to get ultimately to get the best experience out of this.
Lee, it sounds like you're definitely someone who would like to know where the gradients change on a col, and like how long.
No, I think it's because I don't mind climbing. I actually quite enjoy it, but I think just from my experience, I like knowing what to expect in certain ways, because things like this do get really tough, and no matter how much you prepare, even knowing the percentages of different coals and stuff like that, I don't think that really translates to real life. I just think it gives you, well, it depends again, it's subjective, but I think more specifically to people that are doing an event for the first time, I think they feel more comfortable with knowledge, knowing what to expect, like, how hard is it, what it's going to be like, what the ratio of climbing to distances and stuff like that. But I think, personally speaking, yeah, I do like to do research, because I just know that if I'm particularly worried about my safety at some point, I know that I can get to a certain place in time, and I've got enough with me to have to deal with like the unforeseeable kind of like things like weather and stuff. Yeah, I've heard too many horror stories from my brother working for comms, where I'm just like, yeah, I have to take the kit to protect me, otherwise I'm just a bit of a liability.
I think a lot of people underplay as well how much they've actually
Mm,
prepared. That they say that they're going into it
yeah,
winging
yeah.
it, and it turns out well, and then other people seem to think, oh, they've just turned up without even thinking about it. I think people, yeah, it seems to be a bit glorified, that sort of pretending that you're underprepared. I think maybe there's an element of sort of uh, sandbagging, let's say, to sort of preparing that if it goes wrong, then you can just say, "Oh, I wasn't properly prepared." But I don't think there's an excuse for that. If it is true that you aren't properly prepared, then
Go home.
yeah, you're not prepared. Well, obviously you're not preparing yourself properly for the experience. But I think you should also take confidence and pride that respect that you have put in the preparation, and that it's not to be afraid that things go wrong that are out of your control. Like there are high scratch rates in a lot of these events, but that can be improved by your preparation. But there's unfortunate things which happen along the way, and to not sort of dread those in advance and prepare your excuses in advance. That just to be open at this happened. I'm going to learn from it and improve for the next time. I think it's a constant learning opportunity, each one of these events. You can't predict exactly what's going to happen, but if the unforeseen happens, then using that to inform what you do next.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's about, again, mindset. And we keep going back to mindset, but being okay with being unprepared, in air quotes, because you can't possibly prepare for everything. You can do more preparation, but you'll never be able to complete it. You'll never be able to be completely prepared, because that's the nature of the sport. It's the nature of the event itself, and I think that applies both to the practical and psychological side of things, but also the bike fitting side of things. We see a lot of people coming in for bike fits for an event, and they'll think that you just come in, you do it, and it's done, it's fixed, and that is my position and it's set. But just like the rest of your training, as you're trying to adapt and improve your body, then if your body changes, then your bike fit should change too. If you go through your training and you find that you hate hills, then maybe that will change the way that you approach your training, or the way that you approach your race. So yeah, there's a lot of just deciding how you're going to deal with the unknown and being okay with it.
How from a bike fitting perspective, how does that apply to, say, during an event? Would you advise on the things which people can do if they're getting certain pains to alter their position, even if it's radical as shifting your saddle about? I know the idea of bike fit is to put you in a position which you shouldn't get these issues in the first place. But if these sort of things apply, then are there sort of general things which people can do on the road to whether it's moving things around or thinking about their actual position on the bike?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So this actually starts probably before you actually get out onto the road. If you're going through a bike fit process, then again, as I was saying earlier, it's not just a one and done event that happens, but if you're specifically fitting for ultra distance, and it becomes more important for ultra distance that you're continually changing and adapting and testing your bike position and your bike setup. And you really don't know what's going to happen until you go out on the road and ride the position for an extended period of time, maybe with your bags on in different weather conditions, and you're understanding how your body reacts in those situations is really, really important. So, you know, testing your position, testing your setup is a really important part of the process, and then feeding back to those who are helping you, whether that's your coach or your bike fitter, and then suggesting those changes based on that feedback. And sometimes it's positional changes, sometimes it's postural changes, sometimes it's working on other aspects. Like we had a guy who was suffering from really bad bowel problems, like couldn't digest any of his food, and that was affecting his posture. You know, it was kind of rolling his pelvis back because his stomach was all cramped up. And you know, once you cleared that up, then everything else falls into place, and it's like, oh, I don't get saddle sores anymore.
Sorry to interrupt. That sort of brings around a point which I think is key for sort of both sides here. That I'm very big on encouraging people to do a lot of core and functional body training to make sure that they can hold a good position for hours, days on a bicycle. So do you see that from the bike fitting side as well? Do you see that people who come to you who are obviously take care of this aspect and have a strong core essentially? Do you find is that visible for you that when they are sitting on the bike from your side?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like a really fundamental part of our bike fitting process is understanding both the body and then the bike. So do you have what we call just fundamental prerequisites to, you know, being able to ride a bike for a certain amount of distance? Like, can you make the shapes, and then can you sustain that position? Some of it does require testing, but some of it you can kind of test it in the studio itself. You know, if you can you stand on one leg? Can you kind of get out of a chair with one leg? And if you're struggling just to do that when you're fresh, then yeah, that probably indicates some weakness that we can definitely improve, and which will improve the overall performance overall. Like you were talking earlier about performance actually, and you know, actually everything is about performance. Like you know, doing the race is about a performance, and different people's performance windows will be different, but at the end of the day, everyone's trying to kind of complete an event in the most efficient way possible. You know, use the least amount of energy you can to get to the end point. You know, why would you want to make things harder for yourself?
Yeah, minimum effective dose, effectively.
Yeah. And so that applies to both, like bike fit. I see bike fit as a, you know, prerequisite. Like, why would you not get a bike fit? Why would you make things harder for yourself? But at the same time, doing the strength and mobility work that is required to sustain your position.
I'll pick you up on one term you used there in terms of it's a very nitpicky point for me, but sort of I'd like to distinguish between the strength work and the sort of core, sort of core and functional mobility type work. Like strength, I see more as using heavy weights, particularly sort of in the off-season time. But I think the core bit, I think, is crucial for a year round for people for anyone to have in their routine, really, especially people who cycling is their main sport, which is a non-weight bearing sport, which uses very select amount of muscle groups just in your legs. So to be for as much for all-round health and fitness, as well as being able to sit on the bike for a number of days just spinning your legs, I think it's really important. So that's why I like to encourage it so much.
Yeah, again, a great point about just general health and fitness. You want to be you're doing this hobby as a way of maintaining a healthy body, a healthy mind. So, you know, you can always, you know, we see it quite often within the fit studio. Maybe you've gone a little bit too far to an extreme in a movement pattern or a hobby or whatever it is. And so finding that balance between where you're enjoying things and you're having fun is really important.
That almost relates to, I think, the very first answer that I gave, that this whole thing, this ultra distance cycling shouldn't be seen as this extreme thing where these people are like ending up sort of stumbling over the line because they've used their last bit of energy. It should be, the whole thing should be enjoyable, and putting yourself in the best situation on the start line will help you to get the most enjoyment out of it. So, and it can be a sport which you can fit in sustainably all year round to your routine as well. So yes, getting advice from the right people, from the right sources is key to that.
Yeah, and that reminds me a bit about what you were saying, Lee, about all of this just being part of a journey. The event is not the end of it. Just going through the training, the investigating, the exploring, understanding yourself, doing the training with your body, thinking about your kit, your skills, your ability to put up a tent, and as they say with a lot of events, the event itself is the icing on a cake. I mean, obviously it's important. You want to be able to eat the cake, but just embracing the whole process itself as a valuable journey, I think is a healthy mindset to approach.
I think it's always going to be, I think for the majority of people, it's always going to be the hardest thing you have to do. At least that's my experience. So each event, being prepared, having fun with it is super important, because it is always going to be super hard. There are going to be times where it is really nice, where you're going over the top of a pass and the sun's rising, you've had the coldest hour just before dawn, and it feels amazing. And then also you're going to tramp around cow poo fields for 2 kilometers sometimes. So it's really good to have good expectations, and I think it depends on the races you do, but there will always guarantee to be good and bad moods and things you're going through. And I think that makes it so rewarding when you finish these races, because it always feels very emotional. I'm always crying after I finish one. I don't care. I just can't help it. It's just like an emotional thing that comes out of me, whether I've done well or bad or whatever. It's just, in fact, Sophie cried when she finished the Scotland trip we did before, and I asked her why, and she was like, "I'm so glad it's over." And that's some people's reaction, I'm so glad I don't have to pedal anymore, but it's fine, and she enjoyed it. But
yeah. Well, some people find that they find it difficult, challenging for the first part, and then they get to the end and sort of rolling at the end and feel sort of quite upset that it's all come to an end, because it's such it's one of the main appeals that it brings things back to their basics. All you have to do is pedal, eat and sleep for a number of days, and it's just, there's something so pure about that, about the simplicity of it. And I think Lee used that word rewarding, which I think is most important, that these things are very hard, and it's the hard things which bring the most rewards. So it's both a case of trying to recognize that in the time, and when there are difficult moments, that it's gonna be enjoyable at some point in the future. So why not try and enjoy it at the time? It's easy to say that in the sitting here now, but I think sort of just try and remind yourself that that if you wanted it to, if it was all easy, then it wouldn't be rewarding, and it wouldn't be essentially fun at the end of the day.
I guess you got to find out, what do you find fun?
Yeah.
Finishing.
So it seems like a good place to kind of wrap this one up. So thanks very much for your time, gents.
I've got one more point to make.
Sure, go for it.
If anyone wants to rewind to the start and play a drinking game every time you say specific or specificity, then good luck.
And if people want to hear more about your specificity and your coaching services, where can we find you, Sam?
So my website is Acier.cc. That's ACIER. It's the French word for steel. Coming from, I used to live in Sheffield. I now live in France, so it's a nice blend of the two. And I post a lot on Instagram as well, under Acier.cc. A lot of training advice, myth busting, recommendations of things, and feature some of the characters in this world. So I like it to be sort of an inclusive place, and you can get in touch on either of those.
Cool. There's some nice connections there, and from France to Sheffield, Lee. Where can we find you and your bike fitting services?
Yeah, I don't know why you moved. You can go on Instagram at the moment. That's how I'm booking appointments at the moment. I've got a place. I'm actually working from my studio at home at the moment, so I've got like quite a bit of equipment working here. So yeah, you can contact me through there for appointments.
What's your handle on Instagram?
That's about it. I don't have a website yet, so Peak Bike Fitting.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, if you guys need some more ultra distance advice, seek out these two individuals. But hopefully there's some really useful stuff in there. I think it's quite a big one. There's a lot to dissect in that, so give it a few listens. We may even split this into a couple of episodes, just so that you can digest it all. But yeah, thanks so much, guys. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you both. And yeah, hope to catch you on another one sometime.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
No worries.
If you made it to the end of this episode, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, do leave us a rating or review, as this really helps other riders find our podcast too, and motivates us to keep making more episodes. Thanks for your support, and catch you on the next one.
Suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Way or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram @FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram @frequencycycleworks. Until next time, keep on spinning.